The following episode of the Maui Chamber of Commerce's Business Matters radio show was originally broadcast on June 1st, 2021.
Aloha and welcome, Maui. This is the Maui Chamber of Commerce's Business Matters radio show, sponsored by Mokulele Airlines and Sherry Reeve Gallery and Gifts. I am your host, Pamela Tumpop, president of the Maui Chamber of Commerce, and we're kind of winging it at first today. Hopefully we're going to talk a little bit about Hawaii's economic recovery and long-term sustainability with Paul Brewbaker. We're going to discuss the importance of digital equity and what's happening with broadband with Burt. And we're going to learn about an amazing product, gourmet fresh fruit butters. Is that Paul? Paul's on the phone. Good morning and aloha, Paul. How are you?
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, good. Thank you so much. Let me just do a brief introduction for you, Paul. Paul is the principal of TZ Economics, a Hawaii economics consultancy firm. He's been known statewide as one of our top economists. His background in research on the Hawaii economy and financial risk analysis stems from a 25-year affiliation with Bank of Hawaii, including as being its chief economist. He is a graduate of Stanford University, did graduate work at the University of Wisconsin, and received his PhD in economics from the University of Hawaii. Many of you know Paul. He's lectured extensively throughout the state, internationally, he's lectured extensively in international monetary and financial economics throughout our state and elsewhere. So, Paul, welcome to the show. And we're excited to have you here talking about our recovery, but also our long-term sustainability. Tell us about where you've seen how we've come through some of this and where we're going over the next several years.
Well, great. Thanks for inviting me to join you briefly this morning over the phone. We've had a roller coaster of a year. Of course, Maui County's had its troubles with breakouts of COVID infection and super spreader risks like everybody else, but the county's managed to maintain pretty rigorous protocols, safety protocols, public health protocols. I think we have benefited from a certain amount of social cohesion in Hawaii that maybe wasn't as common elsewhere in the country. And then geographic isolation, meant that it was possible to control spread of the coronavirus in ways that other states with more interstate mobility didn't have at their disposal. And now the vaccine is being adopted readily enough, probably not enough to really end this thing, but readily enough so that you can see the way forward for Maui's economy as tourism is restored and its economic impact is mobilized in the related industries.
Yeah. I keep saying what a difference March made. Spring break has been really good to us. But we're seeing a flood of visitors come in. We've got a couple of issues, I'm sure you know. We're still not at full capacity, so restaurants have been challenged to get reservations in. We've got car rentals skyrocketing with lack of cars, but it's been good. We've been excited to see the growth.
Yeah, there are a lot of dislocations. The car rentals, for example, you had excess fleet inventories a year ago at this time that had to be vented. Those cars couldn't just sit around for a year.
Right.
And now people having to rebuild, not just in auto rentals, but across the board, are showing some of the strains in our ability to ramp up production and mobilize the logistics miracle that we have in transportation to get back to an equilibrium. Now, it's not going to be the same equilibrium as the one pre-COVID, which is another thing people are finding out.
Right.
Preferences have shifted. Certain kinds of behaviors have changed not just temporarily, but permanently. And we're going to have to discover by how much in industries like food service and travel and tourism, for that matter. On top of which, the international travel segment probably isn't even looking at a recovery horizon in 2021. So right off the top, a fifth to a quarter of Hawaii's total tourism export receipts will be absent, even if the domestic market segment is fully recovered by this summer. And there's some possibility of that. As you mentioned, we had a seasonal surge associated with spring break, and you can see in the daily passenger counts that the summer travel ramp up through Memorial Day weekend has been underway for some weeks. And so it should be a busy summer, if not everything back to 100%. And it could be that the new normal is 80%. Right.
Yeah. And I appreciate that you talking about those preferences too. What are some of the key preferences that you've seen that are major shifts?
Well, the big one I've been surprised by and paying a lot of attention to over the last year, although unfortunately not as much on Maui. I haven't really gotten the opportunity to sit down with Maui's day set. But the big thing I'm tracking right now is in housing, where it's been fascinating to see how a relatively small shift on the margins of housing demand has resulted in huge impacts in pricing and the composition of sales. So what's happened is remote work has been become more widely acceptable, both within company management as well as among within the workforce. So we'll probably end up closer to 20% of America's workforce working at home at least a few days a week in some kind of a hybrid arrangement, if not full time. And prior to COVID, only 10% of workers had ever worked at home, and less than 5% worked at home full time. So just that shift alone meant that people who were going to be working at home could rethink whether they presently were living in the right home for that kind of lifestyle, whether they needed an extra room for a home office and that kind of thing. And having not had to make long commutes, as had been true in the past, many households chose to physically relocate. So demand in the suburbs and exurbs and in Zoom towns across America, which may include the neighbor islands, demand for housing has gone up, and some of that has vacated the urban core, although there's going to be a backwash, like in any on-eddy beach, when the surf comes in. And I think younger people finding opportunity for lower rents in some of the urban cores. But that dynamic was a surprisingly strong force on the demand side of the housing market. And as you know, on Maui and elsewhere in Hawaii, the supply response is very brittle. It's impossible for developers to respond fast enough. So you had a huge surge in demand, as I say, on the margin, but a small change that had a big effect and a huge surge in pricing for single-family homes. Whereas in the condo space, where vacation rentals were essentially vacated for 6 months, you had excess supply and relatively stagnant prices. And then there were neighborhood-specific effects. So in Maui County, the area with the most rapidly growing single-family home prices was actually Molokai, which is as far away from downtown as you can get. So, the remote work phenomenon is having an impact there in the housing market. I think there are going to be other changes. I mentioned food service earlier. Commercial real estate is going to have to be rethought if people aren't using offices the way they did before. We know, for example, that people spend about 20% more in retail and grocery expenditures in particular than they did pre-COVID. So that part of spending has continued to go up. But we know that they spend 20% less time in grocery stores and retail establishments. A big shift towards e-commerce, which was already growing. But but literally kind of an L-shaped change in retail consumer behavior as we've learned to spend less time but get more stuff, and therefore have less exposure to, breathing the same air as other people in some cases.
Yeah. I really appreciate that. You've read great insights. Thank you. And you keyed up one of my and your really important topics, which is affordable housing and rentals and the crisis that we're seeing. I mean, here on Maui, if you, for any reason, and in many cases we're seeing people have to move out of their homes because the prices are rising exponentially here. People are now saying, hey, this is a good time to sell, which means, unfortunately for tenants, people are having to move. People are struggling to find anything in a reasonable way. You've been involved in this along with the Chamber and I for years, watching policy. What do you think it's going to take for us to move off the dime and really start addressing this critical need?
Well, of course, it's been true for a long time, and especially the last decade, that the supply response has been all jammed up with restrictions on development. I mean, I don't even know. What's Maui's affordable housing requirement now? 25%, 50%? Who even knows? People have given up developers have given up even trying to build on Maui.
Yeah.
It's just as bad on all the other islands to one extent or another. Everybody has their own version of the same rules. So for example, on Oahu, we're building fewer homes. We built fewer homes in the 2010s on Oahu than 100 years ago. So 100 years ago, we built more houses on Oahu each year without computers than we do today. And as a consequence, if you've been tracking what's going on Oahu, people have been leaving Oahu for the last 5 years in numbers larger than all other sources of population growth combined. So there's your solution to the housing crisis, which is enough people can leave Maui that there'll be abandoned homes. And I invite anybody to go look at the demographic data. They're all published on DBED's website. You can see last year the net out-migration of residents, as has been true for the last 5 years, was large enough to nearly stymie natural sources of population growth, birth, less deaths, and of course international migration, particularly since the Trump administration, has been dwindling. So, the solution to this lack of affordable housing on Maui may just be that enough local people leave that it's no longer a problem. But building the housing is not going to be part of the solution, as far as I can tell. The county doesn't seem to be interested. That is to say, legislative leadership in the county council. You can just look at the numbers, and there is no there. So all of these things that are happening on the demand side, an increase in the demand for single-family homes in West Maui, for example, which you can see. Look at the Realtors Association of Maui data by neighborhood. You can see large increases in single-family home prices in West Maui during the pandemic. So something very distinctive was happening, and very, location-specific, a very distinct spatial pattern of demand where supply is not forthcoming. I wouldn't expect a supply response in the short term, nor would I expect one over the course of the decade, unless something dramatically changed.
Right. Well, and it's as you know, the backlog continues. We're also seeing huge shifts up country, where people from off island are coming in with large offers on major ag land. And we're seeing a lot of that being brought up right now here on island. It's been a wild ride.
Yeah, that raises we could have a whole another hour-long discussion about. So it's ag land. What do you think? What are they, farmers?
Right.
Of course not. On Maui, in Maui County, ag land is where you build houses. On the neighbor islands of Hawaii, you build houses in agricultural condominium property regime. That's how you build housing. Nobody builds housing. Housing is not an urban land use on the neighbor islands. It's an agricultural land use. So, that happened 30 or 40 years ago. I don't know who made up that rule. And not me. I thought we were supposed to preserve the good
That's
ag
right.
land.
We want to preserve good ag land.
Preserve the ag land, make sure the farmers can't get water. Did I leave something off the list? Oh, yeah. You have to get our permission to grow something.
Yeah.
And you can't use herbicides or pesticides.
Yeah.
That's the whole list, right? Oh, yeah, that's right. You can't genetically modify, right? You don't get to choose your husband. You just have to randomly mate with people because you're not allowed to modify the human genome. What else did I leave off the list? Anyway, yeah, I mean...
Yeah, that's another hour show. That's another hour show. You're right. See, Paul, we just need you more. You know, we have so many different topics.
No, I don't mean to sound cynical. I mean, it's so ridiculous. Look how big Maui, the island, is. Just the island. Forget about the rest. Forget about Molokai and Lanai. And hey, Molokai and Lanai, they do their own thing. That's cool. Hana does its own thing, but there's so much. You can do this on Google Earth. Go to Google Earth. Cut out Honolulu from Diamond Head to Red Hill. The entire urban core of Honolulu sits between Kihei Pier and Malaya Harbor. Mm-hmm. The Makai of Pilani Highway. Okay, so there's plenty of land on which to engage in conurbation without having what's essentially urban sprawl across the entire landscape of agricultural, of land in the agricultural district, which is a lot of land. And as, many have pointed out, the more easily developable lands, because they've been tilled and smoothed out and flattened and nurtured for 150 years. By the sugar plantations and farmers that came before. So, of course, it's where everybody wants to build.
Right.
But, I don't know, you put housing everywhere. I mean, I understand why people love to live up country. And the point I was making earlier is you don't have to go to the office anymore the way you used to have to.
Right.
And so, I mean, we understand, but there are consequences of a more spatially dispersed pattern of habitation or lodging, if we're going to get into the whole vacation rental thing. And I'm not opposed to it. I'm just saying that if you are going to enable it, literally by allowing homes to be built primarily on agricultural land, as under the agriculture condominium property regime, then you need to adapt your management, right, accordingly. People are not going to live in an urban core or in a resort conurbation where simple mass transit solutions, shuttles and whatnot, can solve their problem. They're going to live way the hell out, as far from town, as far from Wailuku, or as far from the airport, as far from the resorts, which are also as far from everywhere else as is possible. And then you're going to have a traffic problem.
Right.
If you don't manage, right? If you don't manage the bandwidth, if you don't think about road pricing, et cetera, et cetera. So solutions are there. You asked about sustainability earlier. If you have traffic congestion, manage the traffic congestion. If you have environmental and natural resource degradation from the kind of unrestricted, uninhibited recreational natural resource use, it's possible now with, everybody has Google Maps. Everybody knows where the trailhead is. They can all drive their rental car up to whatever, undocumented trail is trending on
all over social media. Yeah, all of Maui's hidden spots are no longer hidden.
And these poor guys, I had this conversation with DLNR a couple times, right? These poor guys at DLNR, the only guys that don't have an app are DLNR. They can't get like $1.380 from the legislature to, right?
Yeah.
Google knows where you are. That's how I know how much time you spend in the grocery store, because I can download Google mobility data and see, people spend more money at the store than they used to, but they spend less time ever since COVID because we track their smartphones and we know who's on the trail. I can tell you right now, just go to Google Maps. You can see the little bar chart, how many people are up at Poli Poli Springs or hiking through Haleakala Crater. And or getting their car washed off the road at Olowalu's. I mean, we have all of this amazing real-time data that we could use to manage and more sustainably manage our resource endowment as well as our infrastructure endowment, right? There's too much traffic. It's A, too cheap to drive, and B, not being managed.
Right.
So my bumper sticker version for Maui is prohibition is not management.
Right.
There's the whole thing.
Well, and I'm sure you know that's coming up, right? With the moratorium on.
It's always a moratorium, right?
Yep.
We don't let you build houses, and guess what? There's not enough of them. Wow, there's a surprise.
Right.
So I'm actually I've been asked by a council member to be available for questions on this. Some kind of hotel moratorium or something.
Yes, that's coming up this week. So I hope you can be available because
I'm on the mainland right now, so it's a question of, and then when I get back, I got to do a bunch of stuff. So it's like this: can I make the phone call when I'm supposed to? Can I remember to call in?
It's okay. We were going to hunt you down, Paul.
Yeah. Can I zoom in? I think my last email to those guys was, I think I can. I have to drop off my car to get a safety inspection for the third time in the last year. There's a whole other story. And so the idea now is either to go to Starbucks or to go to my mom's house, which is not that much farther away, to walk over there and Zoom from there. So we'll see. I will say this about lodging on Maui. I don't know if anybody on the county council has actually sat down and looked at the data, but the lodging inventory on Maui hasn't changed in 30 years by, materially. And to the extent it has, the only thing that's actually grown is vacation rentals. All other lodging formats are fewer in number. If you enumerate them, there are fewer non-vacation rental lodging units on Maui today than there were at the peak around 1992 or about 30 years ago. So I don't even understand where this idea of not building come from. When you have, it's kind of like with housing, right? We have a housing shortage. Good, let's not build anymore. Okay.
Right. I get the plan. That's
that is the plan. Prohibition is not management.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying. Well, and if you look at the bill too, it also morphed in terms of intent. So the original intent was talking about a wait and see, a pause while we reviewed community plans. And
I'll take your word for it. I mean, like a year off from a global pandemic wasn't long enough time off? Did you just not have a gap year? Because every sophomore in college I know, and my family and friends, I've been working with these kids are taking a year off because they're like, dude, I could go to Harvard online or take a year off, work with Brewbaker over here, and then when I can get a vaccination, go back a year later. So, yeah, I've been working with these kids who are all on, plan A, which was take a year off, stay at home.
Right.
And learn something along the way. And nobody stopped. We just kept on working. They kept on working. And, So anyway, what were you guys doing for the last year? What have you been doing for the last 10 years? In 30 years, the lodging inventory hasn't changed on Maui. You need to study that some more? I mean, what are we even talking about? So I'm not from Maui. Well, how would I know where these ideas come from?
Well, and what you always bring, and what's really critical to be bringing now, is sharing that data, Paul. Because
I think that's the only reason people call me up. I don't know that much about it. I've worked recently with one, major Maui resort owner operator. And they're getting all this pilikia about, first they were going to do some renovations. And, I mean, it's already a resort.
Right.
What's the big deal? It's already a hotel. It's already in the middle of a resort area. It can't have, but, yeah, sure, I'll write down the economic impacts for you. So I write my little study, and they make a little presentation, I don't know, to the planning commission or something. I'm like, you have to talk to the planning commission about an existing hotel in an existing resort. Okay, let's go have that conversation. And what you're going to do? Well, we're going to, add some rooms. Like, there's already rooms. We're just going to add some rooms. This has been going on for a couple of years. So the latest I heard from those guys, I finished my work, I don't know, was it a year and a half ago? And then I talked story with them a little while later, and they're like, oh, yeah. Pandemic, no more tourists for 6 months. Good time to renovate, brother? The hotel shut down, brother. Let's renovate. So I don't know. I don't even know if they renovated. Last time I heard, they're getting all kind of grief from these guys. These people just show up, It's like, oh, we oppose this because nothing's happening at TMT. So wait,
well, I hope they're not quarreling
over here from TMT to bitch about this resort. So let me get this straight. You can't build telescopes next to telescopes, and you can't build hotels next to hotels. Is that the plan? You have to think about that. You need a moratorium to think about the idea of using a resort area with existing hotels as a resort area with existing hotels. Is that what we're talking about?
You're pretty.
Don't know.
You've got something there, Paul. You're pretty right on, Paul. I could
on Monday. I will find out.
Okay, well, we need your help, so you'll learn more, and we'll be in there with you, Paul. I could talk to you for weeks, months. If I had time. And was younger, I'd intern for you myself because it's always fascinating.
I have these bright kids. I got to tell you, they're all going back to Cornell and Harvard next year. So, my loss.
A huge loss, I'm sure. Well, Paul, it's been great to have you on. We'll have you on again.
Please, anytime. And sorry, a couple times you've reached out to see if I could help you on something, and I've been so busy I didn't get back in time.
That's okay.
I apologize for those times, and I owe you one.
Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate you so much, and we'll bring you on again soon because we could go for hours even this morning just on one or two topics. So thank you so much.
We should think about where Maui's headed.
We do.
Through mid-century because people are leaving, and I think we're at a major turning point.
Yeah. You're right. We really are at a critical point. All right. Well, thank you for calling in from the mainland, Paul. You have a great day.
Yeah, thanks. You too. Take care.
Thanks, Paul. Take care. Aloha. All right. Well, we're going to take a quick commercial break and learn about Mokulele Airlines, and we'll be right back.
Mokulele Airlines operates the largest commuter airline hub in the country, right here in Kahului. Fly Mokulele from Kahului to Molokai, Lanai, Hana, Waimea, Kona, and now Hilo. Mokulele also operates the only flights between Kapalua and Honolulu. There is never a middle seat on Mokulele, and every seat has a window and aisle. Visit mokuleleairlines.com and take your next flight from the newly renovated Mokulele Terminal.
Good morning. If you are just tuning in, I'm Pamela Timpot, president of the Maui Chamber of Commerce, and this is Business Matters. And this morning now we're going to have Burt Lum. He is with the state of Hawaii. He is the strategic officer for the state of Hawaii's Hawaii Broadband Initiative. So Burt has been very involved and dedicated to digital equity and ensuring that Hawaii establishes robust, resilient, ubiquitous connectivity to the global broadband network. He was previously the executive director of Hawaii Open Data, a nonprofit dedicated to advancing the principles of an open data/knowledge network in Hawaii, including policy work and community collaborations. He has more than 30 years in Hawaii's technology and communications sector and is a frequent speaker and panelist on the topic of information and communication technology, known as ICT. Aloha, Burt. Welcome.
Hey, Pam. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, thanks for being on. We're so glad to have you with us this morning. For those who haven't met Burt, I mean, you can hear his great experience. But right now, the big issue is digital equity. Burt, talk to us about digital equity and how we're going to get expanded bandwidth across the island and all islands.
Well, Pam, this topic of digital equity became top of mind, obviously as a result of the pandemic. And we had always been, supportive of more broadband to Hawaii, but oftentimes broadband is thought of as just access. Mm-hmm. And, it's like, okay, so do you have your Hawaiian Tel connection or your Charter connection or your wireless connection? But it's more than just getting a connection. It's the ability to actually use the technology, once you get it. So whether it's the broadband access technology, or whether it's the computer technology, or even if it's the internet, right? And
right.
How do you best use the internet once you have it?
Right.
So this area of digital equity embrace all of that, and we have a sort of a slogan. It's broadband for all, and all stands for access, literacy, and livelihood. Because you have the access piece, you have the literacy piece, and then you have the livelihood piece, which is basically everything that we do, from work to education to health services to access to government services. All of that is online, right? So that's the livelihood piece. Yeah. So I think it's really an effort to look at how do we address digital equity from a more holistic view, as opposed to just purely as an access point of view.
I really appreciate that. And then, as you talk about this, access, literacy, and I love livelihood, of course, as well. But also we have, we've got youth using all of these technologies for access, and, they're running at really fast speeds, to seniors who are just now still adopting these technologies and learning how to use them in new ways. And so how do we also pair not only, as you mentioned, the access and the distribution of these technologies to provide equity, but how do we help those who are lagging behind increase and improve their use of it?
So what happens is that, there are already a number of on-the-ground programs that enable folks to better understand the technology at hand. So, as an example, you have programs within the Department of Education that address things like computer science in education. And I think there was a bill this past session that encouraged the DOE to create programs or curriculum that encourages computer science from K through 12. And if somebody is now getting exposed to that kind of curriculum, they'll have a foundation upon which they can grow from. And then you have the kind of like keiki to kupuna, right? And you have the kupuna that are perhaps through their livelihood, they weren't really that interested in accessing the internet, but being somewhat sequestered at home now, a lot of the services are available purely through online means. So how do you get more kupuna up to speed? And so there's digital literacy programs that are going on. There's a program that's being launched by the Workforce Development Council that is basically doing digital literacy courses in the community, and there's a site called digitalreadyhawaii.org, and there's digital literacy classes being offered throughout the state in partnership with the community colleges. And so the idea is that can we offer classes from keiki to kupuna? Can we sort of get a digital literacy assessment and a baseline to understand where are we in 2021, and can we show improvements as a result of some of these programs? Another couple of things I wanted to mention was that there's a strong interest in this area called digital navigators, where students are encouraged to work through their school and programs to help kupuna get more hands-on and up to speed on some of the digital tools. Another interesting kind of collaboration that's occurring, which is sort of cross sector, is the telehealth community. And the telehealth community obviously is highly dependent on the broadband network.
Right.
And so as you start to get people accustomed to using the computer for health services, the telehealth folks are out there encouraging, the use of telehealth. But at the same time, if they're also helping to better understand the digital literacy side of things, I think that's another entry into, getting people up to speed. So, it's in education. Education is getting out there. The telehealth folks are getting out there. So it's a very, and workforce development, and this very unified effort now to offer some of these classes, to the community.
I really think that that's spectacular. And I'm glad you brought up the telehealth, because more and more, right, we're seeing our healthcare providers put services online and driving all ages to not only get online to get some of the information that they want to see and learn more about some of the maybe test results they've had and, doctor's visit notes and things like that. But it really is driving more people to get more involved in not only their own healthcare management, but learn these different technologies and communicate in new ways. So that's very exciting. So how?
Yeah. If you are new to telehealth and you are able to use the computer to access your doctor, it's quite refreshing, because you don't have to drive and find parking and then go to the doctor's office and wait 45 minutes before you get your appointment was at 8, but you don't get in until 8:45. It's like all that wasted time. Another thing that I kind of enjoy about using the technology is that if you think about all the time you have to spend to get to an actual in-person meeting. I mean, I have nothing against in-person meetings, but I think the combination of having in-person meetings and maybe Zoom calls, you don't have to drive anywhere to do a Zoom call, and you can do it with everybody across the entire state. You don't have to worry about if it's in Honolulu, what about the neighbor island folks, right? And so you just save a ton of time.
We laugh. I was saying to our board last week, I said, our quorum has greatly improved with Zoom meetings. In fact, nearly everybody has been attending every single meeting because their time is tremendously saved, and our time is tremendously saved. We don't, that we have just even on a half an hour drive to and from meetings, that's an extra hour in our day that we get.
Oh, yeah.
But we have to keep remembering, get up and stretch every once in a while, folks, do a couple jumping jacks in between, take a few steps.
There's one thing good about having this interview on a mobile phone is I can get up and walk around, since you just told me to get up and stretch.
Good, yes. and we're doing these podcasts. I'm in studio, but it's great that we have the technology where you can call in and we can hear you so clearly. So that's awesome. So how are we doing with this rollout? Everybody's talking 5G, and of course 5G is a iteration, sort of the latest and greatest. Bandwidth keeps growing, but how are we doing in getting this across our state?
Well, so I'm from a broadband strategy officer standpoint, I'm somewhat agnostic to the technology neutral. I'm looking at how do we best serve the community in terms of getting the best kind of access that community desires.
Uh-huh.
And obviously, you'd like to get fiber to as far a reach as possible. And sometimes it's referred to the last mile being, the connection to your home.
Right.
And fiber, in the ground is obviously expensive. So we're looking at leveraging whatever federal funds are available to deploy fiber to as far into the communities as possible. And then you have to look at, well, if that doesn't quite service everybody, are there other alternatives that could come into play? And that's where wireless technology is really very useful. And you and I both know, everybody and their brother and sister have, smartphones,
That's
right? And smartphones have been somewhat, from an access standpoint, kind of ubiquitous. But the thing that you got to remember is that just like fiber optics, you got to get the kind of distribution network set up so you can access the wireless network. So whether it's Wi-Fi or 4G or 5G, you still need to have a point in the community where that signal is being distributed.
Right.
And so you still need to get, you need to get fiber to that point, and then you need to distribute that wireless signal. And oftentimes, you'll see 4G towers being put up because 4G actually can go a further distance. And with the new technology of 5G, it's using the same as well as some higher frequencies. And with the higher frequencies with 5G, that requires what they call small cells. And the small cells tend to be more frequently distributed to a neighborhood. And this would be, rather than having a cell tower that's, maybe a mile apart, you may have the need for these small cells, which are more like, several hundred meters apart. And so, the idea is that with the technology, 5G, using some of the higher frequencies, need to have more of these cell sites. And that enables the benefits that the 5G signals or protocol professes to offer, right, which is higher bandwidth, lower latency, and more options for, applications that are kind of more real time. And so there's, that benefit that comes with the 5G network. But again, it really kind of depends on how do you get the infrastructure to be deployed in such a fashion that you can get that kind of wireless distribution efficiently shared across the entire community.
I'm really glad that you said that, and like as you point out, efficiently shared. I was recently told that Maui is a problematic island because so much of our community lies in between two major islands. Not two major islands, but there is that between other islands. But so much of our community lies between two major mountains.
Yeah,
and so a lot of
there's communities that are around the mountain.
Right. And then, a lot of the work when we're having some communication issues, it's because we're bouncing between cell sites, trying to make the connectivity across so many different areas with these two mountains in the way as well. So it's been fascinating to learn a little bit more about our island and what some of our communication challenges are. Burt, I know you've got this survey that we've been helping you distribute. Do you have it on your website, or we can refer them to the chamber if you don't? But we want to capture people's experience. What's happening now? Are you seeing communication challenges as we're trying to roll out this communications in a way?
Well, so Pam, what's interesting is that you bring up an excellent point in that there are communities that are isolated, and each community is going to require a unique solution. So some of it may be served by fiber optics, some of it might be served by wireless technology, some of it might even have to be satellite communications.
Right.
And I must mention that Starlink is also firing up their service, for Hawaii as well. But there's also communities within what we sometimes think of as pretty, maybe not urban, not rural, kind of, let's say Kula as an example. It's not that far out there, but there are households that aren't connected because they're either too far from let's say Hawaiian Tel Central office, or maybe they're, the Charter's or Spectrum's, cable plant didn't quite get to their location. So there are locations just within some pretty well-known towns that aren't connected. So how do you service those folks? And
right.
And so the survey that you're referring to, and I think it's probably easier for them to get to your website because I didn't put it up on our broadband website quite yet. I just shared it with the community. But the survey really just encourages people, if they are running into some issue with their current internet service, whether it's subservice or it's intermittent or what have you, or even if it's it's an affordability issue. Fill out the survey, kind of let us know, because what we want to do is we want to understand like what is actually happening on the ground. What are people encountering? And again, if it's if it's smack dab in the middle of a town, or in Honolulu as an example, there's public housing, right? It could be in the middle of Kalihi, which is a pretty dense and urban area, but in a public housing, they may not have adequate internet access. So how does that get resolved?
Right.
And so we're trying to figure out all the different scenarios that enable or are not fully enabling people to get access to the internet. So, and again, all of them are different. All of them are might require a unique solution. We're not going to be able to service everybody with one flavor, right? So, some of these may be a little bit more customized, but we're trying to, address with the federal funding, what are some of the most, let's say, how can we get the most bang out of our buck, in terms of trying to get people connected? So I think the public housing example is a good one. You have a good, dense population, within a housing, and how do you come up with a technical solution that addresses connectivity for that population?
Yeah.
And then of course you got let's say that one house that's out in Kula someplace, it's not quite there on the map for Hawaiian Telephone Charter. How do you get them connected? Well, that might take another sort of special consideration. Maybe it's you got to go lobby charter or something.
Yeah. Well, and we're getting there, but I'm also learning too that there are a lot of folks who are trying to put in, from the supplier side, they're trying to put some additional bandwidth in, whether it's cell sites, but they're going through hurdles, and so we need to help them. We need the community to understand how important the communications infrastructure is, because to have all of the benefits that we're looking at, to get to the point where we've got the all part of it. So we've got the access, we've got the literacy, and then we can improve livelihoods. We have to have the infrastructure in. So I appreciate you sharing all that, Burt, because this is so important to us right now. Burt, you too. I can go on forever and ever, and unfortunately, we're out of time. But I'll bring you back, because I'd love for you to also talk about Remote Ready Hawaii and some of the other programs. So I hope we can bring you back sometime soon.
Absolutely. Appreciate you having me on, Pam.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us this morning. So thank you, Burt. That's Burt Lum, and he is with the Broadband Hui, and as well as the state, working to expand our broadband network. Thank you, Burt. I hope you have a wonderful Maui day. So just wanted to let everybody know this show is sponsored by Sherry Reeve Gallery and Gifts. Sherry is an amazing and renowned watercolor artist who offers a bright array of beautiful art and gifts for every occasion. You can find Sherry Reeve Gallery and Gifts in historic Makawao Town. It is now my pleasure to welcome Teri-Lee Clemente, and she is the owner of Make Hungry Maui. Aloha, Teri. How are you this morning?
Aloha, Pamela. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm excellent. It's looking like it's going to be a gorgeous day.
Yes, it sure does.
So, Teri-Lee, you and I have gotten to meet before through the Made in Maui County Festival. And you have such an exciting product line, and I love the name, Make Hungry Maui. Tell people about your products and how you came up with that name.
Make Hungry Maui, first of all, was founded on Oahu in Honolulu, which is where I'm originally from, born and raised there. Moved to Maui, going on 7 years. And it was a family recipe that was given to me by my late aunt. And, I played around with it every year up until now. during the holidays, and never thought of it as doing it for business, but I did it during Christmas time, and I made butters for family and friends. It started off with the lily cord butter flavor, which is, everyone is familiar with it. It's a popular flavor here in the islands and with visitors coming in from the mainland. So I did that for, I want to say, maybe 10 years. And just recently, before the pandemic happened, is when my business started. Unfortunately, 2020 wasn't a good year for everyone, but I was able to just, keep myself busy and not try to get too, down about the whole thing that was going on around the whole world, and just keep myself busy. The products that I have are the lily cord butter, which is a passion fruit flavor. I also have a new flavor in the market, which is calamansi fruit butter. Yes, calamansi is a unique flavor all in its own. It is known in the Filipino culture as the Filipino lime. It reminds me of eating key lime pie or lemon meringue. It has that citrus, slightly tart flavor. It's not too strong. I do have people who, tell me, "Oh, it's too tart. I don't think I'm going to like it." And I always, and I have to tell them, you need to try it first, and then you can be the judge for yourself. And then once they do that,
they love
it changes their concept. Yeah, the whole flavor.
I hate to interrupt you, Terry. I know we're running out of time. So tell us a little quickly, too, about any other products that you have and where people can find them.
People can find them. I'm located at Wailea Village in Wailea, at the farmers market every Tuesdays from 8 to 11:30. I will be back there towards the end of June. They can also find my butters at Island Gourmet Market at the shops at Wailea. And I will restock them shortly because I just got back from a trip from Oahu and started to get my jars restocked because the vendor was, the supplier was out of stock for a few weeks. So I'm starting to get that all back into stock. And soon, Ululani Hawaiian Shave Ice at her retail.
Oh, awesome. Thank you, Terry. I'm so sorry we had to go. The hour goes so quick, but I hope everybody got to hear that. Teri-Lee's products are outstanding. That is really all the time we've had for Business Matters today, sponsored by Mokulele Airlines and Sherry Reeve Gallery and Gifts. I'm your host, Pamela Timpot, president of the Maui Chamber of Commerce, wishing you blessings and best wishes for a beautiful Maui day.